The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
All right, welcome to the Earley Show, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. All right, today we have a real treat. We have John Morgan from Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is the biggest personal injury law firm in the United States. But John isn't just a lawyer. He owns multiple businesses, both inside and outside the legal profession. He's a philanthropist, and he's been behind many political initiatives that have helped millions of people. He does a lot of good. So, John, I just want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for jumping on with us.
I'm very happy to be here, Chris.
Thank you. So I just want to take the listener on a quick little tour here. The way that I connected with you is I emailed you, and you emailed me back, and we started this little email thing. And then I said, I really want to meet you. And then one day you were in New Hampshire, and you said, all right, tomorrow, Chili's in Tilton, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And you met me at a Chili's in Tilton, and my wife was like, "Are you kidding me? He's actually going to meet you, and he's going to do it at Chili's." We thought it was awesome. It was awesome. So
it was right down the street from my house, so it was easy for me.
Well, that was just awesome, and it was basically just you and I in this Chili's in Tilton, New Hampshire, and that conversation really kind of changed my mindset and my practice. And you were very generous, and just you gave me a lot that I appreciated. And so that was about a 2-hour lunch. You and I talked about business, family, life. I think we got into our shared experience of growing up around addiction. And at the end of our conversation, we reached the parking lot. You looked me in the eye. You shook my hand and you said, "I hope you have great success." And I really appreciated that, because that was very generous of you, and I thank you for that.
Well, I'm in it.
Thank you. So, just after our Chili's lunch, a lawyer said to me, "You mean Morgan just met you? There was, that was it? He just showed up and met you for lunch, nothing else?" I said, "Yeah." And I think he just didn't realize that you are like that. You're just a giver. Right, you talking about giving a lot, so I think he was surprised, and I said, well, that's just the kind of guy that he struck me as, a guy who's generous. So
there's a great book to read. It's called Give and Take. That's the name of the book. For me, it's a must read. But at the end of the day, what the book really stands for is the proposition is that there are givers and there are takers. And there are people who give, but they expect something in return if they give. In other words, I'll do this if you do that. I'll buy you a drink, will you do this? But what the book's basic proposition is at the end is that when you give, whether it's money or your time or kindness, when you give expecting nothing in return, the people that give expecting nothing in return are the ones who get the most. The ones who give expecting something in return don't do so well. And so I've been fortunate, just the way that I'm genetically programmed, to been built and I like people. And, if that helped your career and helped you going forward, those 2 hours that I took, I had to eat lunch anyway, maybe not 2 hours, but I had to eat lunch anyway. So it's not like I gave up that much, but I got to give you so much. And pulling out of the Chili's you have a good feeling. When there's a prayer by Mother Teresa which goes real fast. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love, and the fruit of love is service to each other, and the fruit of service is peace. And that lunch was a little bit of service work to me to help you to get better. But then the gift that I got is I got to pull out of the Chili's and I got to feel peace. So we all won that day at Chili's.
That's so important. I mean, that's huge. I mean, I don't think the average gal is thinking like that. That's next level thinking. It's so simple, but it's so rare.
Well, the name of the prayer is called A Simple Path.
That's so true.
By Mother Teresa.
Oh my God. Well, that's just, I obviously, appreciated that. And that was service. And that's what it was. I just, you and I have a lot in common. The more I've read your books, listened on podcasts, we have a lot in common. We both grew up in dysfunctional households. We're both paper boys. We both, despite a lot of time and pressure, we don't miss our kids' important life events.
Well.
And that's really everything to me, And we don't, golf, fish, hunt. I think like like me, you're a business person, a businessman. You really love business, and you don't golf, those types of things. Is that right or no?
Well, first of all, let's talk about hunting. The idea of blasting a deer to smithereens and having blood all over my body. I've got deers in my side yard. I could kill deer laying on a raft with a handgun. I don't have any. I've never shot a gun. I don't want to kill anything, and I don't like the taste of deer. That's number one. Fishing, I don't get fishing because I don't like riding around on boats pounding. And if I want fish, I just go down to Lombardi Seafood and get fish. So I don't like only guy has fun on the boat to me is the guy driving the boat, and I don't know how to drive a boat. And then as far as golf, look, when these top golfers are hitting the ball in the water and hitting the ball in the woods and fucking up, when Tiger Woods is hitting the ball in the water, I'd rather play ping pong.
I love ping pong. Another thing we have in common.
I like ping pong.
Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So again, another thing we have in common, we're givers, not takers. Let me just ask you if I could. So, I know that you grew up oldest of 5 kids. Is that right?
Yes.
And it just seems like there was some chaos, instability. It was hard, and you were kind of wearing a lot of hats. You were wearing the hat that any kid, just being a child, but also like a caretaker. And so it's just, I'd love to hear from you on, what that was like. Can you take us through what it was like having to take on that responsibility at such an early age for your siblings?
Well, it was like this, and by the way, even though as bad as it is, when you hear my story, it sounds terrible, but the truth is I really had a great childhood. I mean, I had fun. I always found a way. I was always, and I learned to compartmentalize. I learned that when I walk out the door, I just leave behind all the chaos that was there and all the dysfunction. But basically, my dad drank way too much, couldn't hold a job, and my mother didn't in the beginning, but then my mother became a raging alcoholic. So by the time my little brother was born, I was 10 or 11, and she couldn't even get up to take care of him. So a lot of times I was up changing him, giving him a diaper, missing school while we waited for her to kind of sober up. My dad's drinking never stopped, and my dad finally lost enough jobs. We had to move to Florida. When we moved to Florida, my mother couldn't maintain. She left. So it was a life of helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness. Those were some of the feelings, but I never lost hope, and I never felt helpless, and I never felt powerless. I'd feel like I'm going to get through this. And I believe that bad luck of that childhood turned out to be some of my best luck because it made me grow up faster. It made me do what I had to do. So, and by the way, I was still having a good time. I still was out playing baseball. Still, I mean, I lived and breathed on a basketball court in Lexington, Kentucky. So when you hear my story, it's like, oh my God. But the truth is, I had a great time. To this day, when I go back to Lexington, Kentucky, I get together with my friends from my Tigers Little League team, and I still see people I went to school with. And so it was bad. It was really bad, but it turned out to be what made me. And so I'm not unhappy about it. I just watched a special on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he had a terrible childhood, and he said a very similar thing. And I was like, there you go.
I didn't know that about him. So
It's on Netflix.
wow, okay, I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah,
So
right now.
you know, tell me if I'm mistaken, but your grandmother was massive on your upbringing.
My
Is that
grandmother
right?
was very important because she was the stability. She was the one that nurtured me. She was the one that loved me. She was the one that believed in me. She's the one when I got my paper route. I got my paper route because one day I went down, my tooth was hurt, and I went down to the dentist, and I heard my dad out in the hallway, and the dentist said, we can do a root canal or we can pull it. And my dad said, how much? He said, 50 for the root canal and 5 to pull it. And my dad said, I guess we have to pull it. So I'm 10 years old and having a permanent tooth pulled. That was a big day for me because I decided that day I felt this hole in the side of my head. And I it's like, I was old enough and smart enough to know this is not good. But from that day forward, I made a decision that I'm never going to be in a position for that to happen to me again. And so my grandmother went down. You had to buy the paper routes in Lexington. So we went down to the Second National Bank. She signed on my loan. She was a secretary of the agriculture department for University of Kentucky. She signed on my loan. I got my loan, and I was off to the races. And when I finally left, I was making like $300 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot today, but it was a bloody fortune, 57 years ago. So, and I was able to operate. I got what I wanted. I bought my own clothes. I bought my own. But my grandmother was the one. She was the sober one. She was the one that nurtured us. She was the one that believed in us. When my brother got hurt and paralyzed down here in Florida, she gave up everything and moved to Florida. She's the person who taught me what unconditional love looked like. And it's very important to be taught that, because I think to be able to love unconditionally, you have to have been loved unconditionally. It's just, I think it's just easier if you learn it.
I heard you describe her as a sanctuary for you when you were a kid.
It was a sanctuary. She lived 2 streets over, and I could get on my bicycle and go over there. And when I walked into this day, I have dreams about walking into her little apartment. And there's a smell that you may have remembered from your grandmother's, or a place of fondness. And sometimes I'll have dreams, and there's this red pillow that I would take a nap on. And in my dream, I can smell that pillow. And when I wake up from those dreams, I don't have them enough. I'd like to have them more. When I wake up from those dreams, I'm incredibly at peace, but I'm then sad that I'm awake and out of that apartment.
So, I gotta, hearing your story, it's not dissimilar to mine. So the only difference is my dad, he was a very bad alcoholic. He was very successful in business in Manhattan, at his own business, but he became homeless. And so
Wow.
my mom, for good or worse, took me to see him there. And so that was hard for a 10, 11-year-old kid or even younger, 8, 9 boy to see. So I'm really impressed that you were able to get through in many ways. Yeah, you had a lot of good things, Little League, stuff is the best. It's awesome, unforgettable. But you had a lot, and I think you're an unusual person to. I know you are unusual to be so successful coming from adversity of that nature. That's not, that's not, you don't see it all the time.
But a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, for sure.
If you spend time feeling sorry for yourself, you can't spend time getting on with life. And so I never spent any time feeling sorry for myself. When my grandmother told me to, when I was going off to college, she said, she said, why are you leaving early? I said, well, I'm going to rush a fraternity. She said, I just wish you wouldn't. I said, why? She said, we don't belong with those type of people. I said, what type of people? She goes, the fraternities are money people. And I go, well, I'm going to go do it. Mm-hmm. And she said, and then she started crying. And I said, what are you crying about? She said, I don't want you to be hurt. But I went up and I joined it. And then I not only joined it, I became president of Interfraternity Council before it was all over. So, she had that mindset that, when she wasn't being a secretary, she took in sewing for rich people in Lexington. A lot of times in that little apartment, the rich people who owned horse farms would come to her apartment, and she'd be down on her hands and knees pinning up their dresses. And so she kind of saw herself as a third-class citizen. I saw her as the Queen Mother. I mean, I saw her as royalty. I hated it when I saw her on her knees pinning up those dresses. Mm-hmm. But the thing about her is she was doing that, and she paid into Social Security for the seamstress work, and then she had her government pension. So when she retired, she had 2 pensions. So she also was, a thinker and a planner and a saver. That's fantastic. It's all everything that's happened to me good emanates from her.
We're both fathers. How I can tell you from my experience, what I witnessed from my father showed me how not to father. So I go the other way. I don't miss. We had a baseball game last night, basketball, you name it, right? Probably same with you when your kids were growing up. How did that shape you? Because that shaped me, because I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going this way, right? The other way. How did your upbringing influence the dad that you are?
Well, I wanted, I've told my children that they're, 4 of them, I got 4 children. 3 of my boys are lawyers with me. They're very, very successful. They've got some of the biggest verdicts in the history of Florida. My daughter owns a structured settlement company. I've told my kids all along, at the end of the day, what I want them to take from me is to take what's good and leave what's bad. Because, look, I'm not a perfect person. I've made my own mistakes in life. I probably drank too much myself, because I was out hustling business in union halls. And, children of alcoholics are lots of times teetotalers or alcoholics. I think I technically was an alcoholic. I never felt bad about it because I was high functioning. I was in the union halls and then off to the little bars where you shot pool and played that shuffleboard game. And I always considered I'm working. I'm out here with the plumbers and the pipe fitters and the AFL-CIO. But, in retrospect, I was an alcoholic. I drank too much. But I never missed a baseball game. I've coached teams. I wanted, and even now with my grandchildren, and I got one, John, who, he counts when he goes and gets his first communion, he's out there counting to see who all's there and who's not there. He's taking roll for all of us. So I've always felt it was very important they look up and see me there. I think the whole time, one time I missed one recital for Kate, but I made everything. And I prioritized that because that's something I can control. And I did. And I spent a lot of time with them on the weekends. I'd come home at 4 or 5. We had a beach place. We'd go over to the beach. And for 72 hours, it was just us. So I believe that the secret to parenting is time. Lots and lots and lots of time. Showing up.
Speaking my language, because you can't get that back. And that's all they want.
Yeah, and it goes fast.
Money. Yeah. So, yeah, and that's the cool part, how fast it goes. Do you think you were traumatized by your upbringing?
I was at the time. Yeah, look, there was you. It's if some of the scenes that happened were like right out of Cops, the show Cops, because the cops were there. Yeah, I was traumatized. We lost our home. We didn't have, sometimes the power get cut off. I mean, the AC went down in Florida once for 4 years. And I'm sure I was, and when I was inside the house, yeah, there was, but when I walked out of that house, it's like it never happened. It's like it never happened. I recently said to a friend who was really close to me back in the day, I said, I said, I had a bad inside of my house, and I could never let anybody in the house because it was just, terrible. And I said, but I did a pretty good job of hiding it from you guys. And Jay Colling is his name. He goes, you didn't hide shit from us. We all knew how bad it was. What we couldn't believe is how self-confident you were. And it was kind of shocking because I'm like, I thought I had everybody fooled. I thought everybody just thought, hey, he just lives in this little bullshit house, but that's okay. It's just a house. And, but I didn't have anybody. I just got a click. We just got a $20 million verdict. So that's a good day. Just came across my screen.
Did you get an email about that just now?
A text just came across the Earley Show. It said $20 million. Yeah.
Well, that's a good day. All right. That's pretty.
Yeah. So I'm happy. I'm happy now.
So, well, that's freaking phenomenal.
That helps.
Of course. Congratulations.
As Bono says, some days are better than others.
No doubt. He's a smart man. So that's a massive feat. Congrats on the verdict. So, I want to talk about your business, obviously, how the early stages, how you got going. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you're a compassionate guy, and that arose or took root in your childhood because you needed to. I became
the primary caregiver. For my little brother, I really became the father, and but I never felt the pressure. It was just like, it was just the way it was. And so it never felt like a burden at all. And I love them all so much that I knew, so I never felt I was never upset about it. I was just glad that I was there to be able to do it. And I'm still, incredibly close to those brothers and sisters.
Aren't you dentists?
2 are dentists. One she's a clinical psychologist, and Tim is the one who was paralyzed when he was 18. He worked with me for 27 years. He's really had some big health issues recently. I was at his house yesterday. So,
sorry.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they all. When my dad would get fired, he would always say to us, "Whatever you do, be a professional. Nobody can fire you." And so we all watched that. And so, I couldn't be a dentist because I suck in math and science. If I hadn't sat next to Chuck Morgan in algebra, I think I'd still be sitting at Winter Park High School because I just cheated my ass off in algebra just to get the hell out because it didn't make those X's and Y's and I didn't know what is this. And so I saw George Carlin in concert in Vegas, and he said, "I'm so glad I took geometry. A day doesn't go by that I don't do a proof or two." So I kind of had that feeling. I was like, hey, I'm cheating, but I'm not cheating because if I was trying to, cheat to be an engineer, but they don't have to worry. Those guys don't have to worry about me. The algebra crew does not have to worry about me.
All right. So, just moving forward, right? Mid 80s, I believe you were at a small firm and you were rainmaking, right? I think you were rainmaking more than any of your other colleagues, but it was time to part ways. What was your mindset walking out the door? Where was your headspace? Did you have a plan? Like what was going on at that moment when you left?
Well, I always have a plan. I've always had a plan in life. And I've said since I was a kid, hope is not a plan. A plan has to have a plan. So I had a plan, but the people I worked for came and they gave me a review. I didn't like the review. They said I wanted way up here, and they had way down here, and I was telling them I wanted to be a partner, and they say you're behind 4 different people, and we went back and forth. But because I was out there bringing in so much business, and I knew I could bring the business in. I'd only been with them for 2.5 years, and so I just told them. We had that meeting, and 3 days later, I went that night when they told me that what they thought I was worth, and then I came back. I went out. There's a guy that I was on another case with. I said, let's start a firm. He said, okay. 3 days later, I came back to those guys and I said, look, I'm leaving. And they said, why? I said, well, you told me I was worth X. We're going to do some algebra right now. I said, you told me I was worth X and I thought I was worth Y. And it's a huge difference. And how can I stay? I mean, if I stay after telling you all this, then I'm the biggest phony in the world, fraud in the world. And so I left. And but I didn't feel nervous because, number one, my wife was a lawyer. She had a job at Ackerman Centerfit. She was a securities lawyer. So I had that. I had cases. But the main thing I had was I had John Morgan. And I knew what John Morgan was capable of. I've made a lot of investments in my life, but all the investments that I've made on John Morgan have been the best ones because I know who he is. I know his work ethic. I know how hard he'll work. And so I didn't feel, and when I was leaving, I didn't think I was risking much because I wasn't getting a lot. I made 64 grand. And so they were surprised. And I told them that they'd made the biggest mistake of their law firm because I told them, I said, they said, why are you leaving? I said, I'm a superstar. And you don't seem to agree with that. And I said, I'm glad you don't, because it's going to be extra rocket fuel for me. Not only am I going to show myself, I'm going to show you. And it did drive me.
How are you bringing in so much business at such an early age? You were still in your 20s, right?
Well, here's how. Number one, every Friday I would go to a different city and I'd park my car. I'd have a lunch with somebody and I would cold call lawyers. I'd walk in to your office in Sanford, Florida. Is Chris Earley in? And I'd walk in and you'd be sitting there and you're like, hi. I'm like, hey, Chris, I'm John Morgan. And they're kind of like, what? And it's like, I've seen your name here and I've heard a lot about you and I just wanted to meet you. And then I would tell them, and then I'd chat. And then I'd say, I look around, I see your diploma over there. Oh, you're a Gator. And I try to make some comment, And then I would go for the kill. I'd say, what do you do with your personal injury business? And they'd say, well, I'd send it to this guy. Well, are you happy? And lots of times I walked out with cases. I mean, one time I walked out with this one guy, Abbott Herring, had been the state attorney, and I pulled in and I finally asked him, I go, what do you do with your business? And he goes, well, we were giving it to a firm called Fisher & Matthews, but they fucked me on a referral fee. I said, well, I'll never fuck you on a referral fee. He brought his son in, Mike, and he goes, Mike, how many PI cases do we have here? And Mike goes, he was probably about 40, 45. And so he goes, give them all to this guy. And so I walked out with I was driving a Nissan Maxima, and it took me, I had to put all the files in the back seat. I had to open the trunk. I mean, Nissan was like, I had, Nissan Maxima with the leather package. I drove out of there, and so I did that every Friday. And I'd cold call from 9 till lunch. And I have a designated lunch, and then I'd go cold call on 2 or 3 other people, and I just asked for the business. I just went to meet them every Friday. That was part of my job. I sold Yellow Pages before I went to law school, so I was very good at selling Yellow Pages. I sold Yellow Pages for 18 months. The full year I worked, I made like $80,000 selling Yellow Pages in 1979. So I was good at just cold calling. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. And then, I would go to these unions and meet the business agents and the presidents. And then that entailed going to the dive bars with them in parts unknown. It wasn't like I was in hotel lobby bars. I was in just dumps. A lot of smoke, a lot of pool, a lot of jukeboxes. But again, I loved it. It wasn't work. I was having the time of my life. I'd rather be drinking with painters than drinking at a country club. I don't like country clubs. I'd rather be with painters and pipe fitters than at a country club. I find country clubs and country club people phony as shit.
I hear you on that. So you talk about delegating ruthlessly, and that really kind of stuck with me, and it's changed my approach to business. When did you start delegating ruthlessly?
I started delegating ruthlessly when I realized it was getting too big for me. When I heard somebody say one time, if everyone is accountable, no one is accountable. And it's like, wait a minute, say that again. If everyone is accountable, no one's accountable. What that meant was when something goes wrong, who's responsible for it? So I decided to start making a lot of people accountable. When I would find somebody who was very accountable, when I knew they were accountable, is when you can send something to somebody and you can delete it and it's handled. At a certain point in time with certain people, you got that. Like with my wife, I know I can send her something and it's done. Just forget it. Mm-hmm. There's some people that you got to write back, hey, did you get my Crestor?
Right.
Because you're not sure. But once I find out that somebody is what I call send delete person, then I give them big responsibilities. I expect them to execute. I know they're going to execute. I got a lot of them in my organization, and then I ruthlessly delegate. And then what you got to realize, and the thing that a lot of people make a mistake in, they all think I'm the only one that can do it. If the client doesn't meet with me, they're not going to sign up. If I don't try the case, we're not going to win. It's got to be me. They think it's all with them because that's what they want to think. Mm-hmm. But then I heard another thing that said, and there's another one that kind of made me, cut my head like one of my German shepherds. And it said, graveyards are full of irreplaceable people. And I thought, that includes me because one day I'm going to be in a graveyard. And then I started thinking, well, I just got to quit acting like I'm irreplaceable because there's no way for me to scale. There's no way for John Morgan to be John Morgan and all to do what I want to do. I've got to find the send delete people. I got to expect them to execute. I got to ruthlessly delegate, and then I can really build this monster. And that's what I did.
You recommended the book at some point. I don't know where. Never Eat Alone.
Right.
It's a really good book.
Did you read it?
I read it. It was a long read, and I read it, and that was a dense book about one topic, right? About how to do it the right way, networking. When I talk to other lawyers, when I'm in front of them, I say, read this book, and the smart ones will read it. But that was good. That's a fantastic read because that changes your whole approach. This goes back to the giving thing and not taking.
Well, you cannot make money. You cannot get opportunities eating peanut butter and jelly at your desk. Nothing's ever happened to me in my desk eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Right.
But when you give a speech, even when I give speeches, around the country, the days I wake up and go to the plane to fly there, I'm like, why did I agree to do this? But then you get there And the next thing you know, you got a new friend, you're getting new cases, you're getting this. The other day, I gave 2 speeches in one day. I gave one to the Florida broadcasters, and the next day, one of the broadcasters called me from South Florida with a monster case. So, I'm out at the Four Seasons. I give the speech. I didn't even meet the person. I was the keynote speaker at their banquet, and then I get a call, and there it was I didn't eat much because it was, rubber chicken, but I drank. I'm going to write another book called Never Drink Alone. I'd had some wine, but if you're not out and about, if you're not out in the mix, you can't win the lottery unless you have lottery balls. And you can't get lottery balls unless you go out and pick them up. And so I look at lunch, speaking, networking as just lottery balls that gives me a chance to win the bingo.
I can't agree more, right? I mean, you're getting in front, one to many, right? And like you, when I go talk, maybe leading up to a talk, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'd rather just stay home with my family or leave, not leave the office or whatever it is. But when you do it, it's a shot in the arm every time. It's going to come back to you.
Yeah, when you're driving out of there, when it's over, you're happy you did it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%.
No question.
You mentioned once one regret was not buying a vanity phone number earlier. Any other regrets that you would teach the lawyer, a lawyer listening to this, things not to do?
Well, listen, in retrospect, we'd have to have a 3-hour Zoom on it because there are so many things that I was doing that I would never do today. I mean, it was like I was driving the wrong way. But you don't know you're driving the wrong way. And not only was I driving the wrong way, I was driving the wrong way fast. Not only was I driving the wrong way, I was going around and giving speeches about, do it this way. I was actually lecturing people about some of the things I was doing that at some point in my career, I went, wait a minute. This is not the way to do it. Different things that, evolved. And, so the John Morgan today, when I look back at some of the stuff I was doing, I was driving the wrong way. It worked out, but it could have been really much better if I was doing some of the things then that I do now.
So let me ask you this. At one point you gave your dad a job.
I did.
What was that like? How did that feel for you?
It felt great because even though he was, a defective guy, I loved him dearly. And so he, plopped around. I went back to law school late because when I was selling Yellow Pages, he was out of work. But I was making so much money, I was able to supplement and keep them afloat. And so I had people signing up, I had people who go out and sign up cases around the state. Like some lawyers would never let somebody sign up a case unless it was them. I didn't. That's when I first started ruthlessly delegating by saying, I don't have to meet the client personally. So I said to my dad, he'd gone on Social Security, and I said, Daddy, why don't you come down here and be one of my investigators? He goes, what's that entail? I said, you drive around, you meet clients, you sign them up, you come back. And he's like, well, if you need my help, he said, if you need my help, I'll help you.
That's awesome.
I said, well, I do need your help. And I said, and it's win-win. And he said, I'll do it. So my dad came to do that. We called him an investigator, and he'd go out and sign up cases. And at the end of the day, he would come back and he would sit in front of my desk and he'd smoke a cigarette, of course, or two, and tell me about, all what happened in the day. And it was wonderful. And I was able to supplement his Social Security, so he had everything. We had his health benefits, and he did it until he finally, he died of emphysema, and he finally, started having real troubles with that, and then he couldn't do it anymore. But he died of emphysema. But yeah, so it worked out, and I got to see my dad every day. My brother, the brother in the wheelchair, he was with me for 27 years, and I got to see him all day long. He headed up my call center. So, I love being with my family.
That's fantastic to give them that opportunity, to
to have people that love you watching. I felt it was a two-way street. I felt that, who better to have watching my hen house than my father and my brother.
Let me ask you this. I'm interested in this. We talked about this at Chili's briefly, and you, I don't know if I got this right. I think you may have been a slightly emotional about the story. Now, this is the case where you shut up out of bed, right, 3 a.m, got in the shower, right, going to sign up a big case, and that case resolved,
right?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that case really got you going, got the whole thing working pretty.
Yeah, that case launched me.
Right. But it's what he said to you at some point that I wanted to ask you about. Didn't he?
Well, what he said was, it was a case where one of the guys I sold Yellow Pages with, his wife worked at a hospital. A boy come in, and the boy was paralyzed from an automobile accident. It was a very difficult case, and lots of hair on it. And I worked it, and then ultimately settled it for a big number against Key Capital Leasing Company, Key Capital Bank. The client's name was David Vega versus Key Capital Leasing. So I settled it for a big number. I put his money with some money people, and I said goodbye. He was 18. I was in my 20s. A few years ago, I get a call from David Vega, and he's like, I need your help. I'm like, oh, he's out of money. And because he's paraplegic. And I said, what happened? He said, I want to come down and tell you. I said, okay, come on down. I said, he really needs money. He's coming down here to see me. So he comes down, he says he was driving downtown Orlando, and he got drunk, and he hit a bus, and the Lynx bus they're looking for money. I said, how much damage did you do? He's like $40,000. Then I said, do you have any money? He goes, oh, I got a lot of money. I go, you have a lot of money? He told me, like, I don't want to tell you what it was, but it was millions and millions and millions of dollars. Whoa. I said, are you still with Mike Davis? He goes, oh yeah, Mike Davis. I go, where's your dad? I bought him a house in the Dominican Republic. And what'd you do after I'm an architect. It's like, oh my God, here's this guy, and his life is wonderful and the case was so hard. But I hadn't really thought about David that much. But when we were leaving on the elevator, I said to David, David, what made you call me? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me like I was just crazy. And he said, you're my lawyer. And it was like, wow. It was like chills, stunned, happy. And I was like, yeah, I'm his lawyer. I did this. I took a case where other lawyers were telling him there's only 100,000 in coverage, and I didn't. And I did this. And then he looks at me because he could tell, and he said, do you know how many cases I've sent you over the years? I go, no, I really don't. Because I tell everybody about you, John. And then I leaned down and I hugged now a grown man, because I wasn't that much younger than him, or much older than him at the time. And then he got in that elevator and the doors closed. And I went back to my office and I sat down, and it was like, wow, I have picked the right profession. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. it empowered me, and it's like, okay, I feel good about what I'm doing.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, what do you think your greatest success in life is so far?
4 children. My 4 children are, every one of them, and I'm not just saying this, every one of them is smarter than me. None of them are alcoholics. None of them drank too much. They're very moral. That's their mother's, they're very moral, good people. They're raising good children. I see them the other day. I'm at the beach, and my son Mike his son Jack is jumping in the pool, and I hear him go 1, 2, 3, bubble gum. Well, that's what I used to say when they would jump in the water. I see them out playing hot box, which is basically pickle, on the beach, and all the things I did with them, they're doing now. That makes me feel good, because that makes me think they had a great childhood. I heard 1, 2, 3 bubble gum. I looked over. I'm like, I remember that. And so my greatest success is what I wanted to have as my greatest success is my 4 children to do well financially, to do well morally, ethically, spiritually, to be good people, and to be better than me. And all 4 of them are way smarter and better than me, and have lifted my business. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying that they've done really substantial things in the business, and I get to be with them, constantly. So I'm a lucky guy, because I get to have these businesses, but I get to do it with my family. My wife's my law partner at Morgan & Morgan. So we have almost 1,000 lawyers now, but the core are my children and my wife.
That's amazing. That's success. That's really fantastic.
No
I don't know about you, but growing up kind of in a tough environment, it kind of gave me a chip on my shoulder. And I feel like that's a bit of an advantage for me over my competitors. Do you feel like you have a chip on your shoulder that you had to get through a little bit more than the average lawyer to succeed?
I think I did. I think I was quick to anger. I was quick to fight. I had probably a lot of fist fights. When I could fight. I was a pretty good little fighter, scrapper, but I did not take shit. I was, if you come at me, I come, if you slap me in the face, I'll grab a tire iron and hit you across the face with it. I don't want to fight, but I will fight. And I think it gave me a chip in the sense that, you're not going to stop me. You're just not going to stop me. I'm coming out of this. I used to tell people. I used to listen to when I was in Kentucky. I used to listen. I had a CD, but not a CD, a 45, but Neil Diamond, "Sweet Caroline," and there's these words in "Sweet Caroline" that I used to listen. I'd play it like 10, 15, 20 times, just sitting there listening to it. And there was all these words like, when spring becomes the summer, that's like it's bad now, but good times are coming. Hurting runs off my shoulder. One touching one, that was God touching me. I took all these meanings from Sweet Caroline, and it spoke to me, and it empowered me, and it was such an uplifting song to me that I'd play it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I did it, every day that I got in my car for years on the way to work. The first thing I did, I played Sweet Caroline. I crank it all the way up. When I go into restaurants and bars where people know me and they play the accordions or piano, as soon as I walk in, they start playing Sweet Caroline. My daughter had her daughter, and she named her Caroline Grace. They know what Sweet Caroline means to me. And so it was kind of my anthem, but I'm coming out of this. When spring becomes the summer, summer's coming. Summer's coming. One touch and one. I'm in with God. He's going to pull me out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never I should have been hopeless. I wasn't hopeless because I had me and I had God and I had my brothers and sister, and I knew I was going to be okay. And I always have been. I mean, I've been tight. I've been on fumes, but I always made it, because if I get in trouble, I just work. When I worked at Disney, I just work. You want overtime? Yep. I never turned down overtime. I work on Christmas Day at Disney because you got triple time. I was okay. There's no good Christmas at my house anyway. I just rather make triple money and have fun out here at Disney. So work has never been a problem for me. Work. I was worked at Disney as a character, as Pluto, and at Christmas I'd work there from 8 to 5. At 5 o'clock they'd come in. They say, "Do you want to drive in the parade overtime?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd drive in the parade." I'd sit around until 9 o'clock. I'd drive in the parade. I'd run from the parade to my car. I'd go to UPS. I'd throw boxes from 11 to 3. I'd race back to Disney. I'd sleep in the parking lot, and then I'd do it all again and take naps on my breaks from being Pluto. And so I made all this money at Christmas and guess what? I loved every minute of that.
Well, I think you said it. I think it was in your vision book that you love Disney because people are having the time of their life, and you're part of that time of their life.
I was part of not only the time of their life, I was part of, as Pluto or King Louie. Those were the characters I played. I was like a movie star, because I was Pluto. But these people would come running out of the monorail, grown men running to hug me. And I'm there, with my arms out, and I'm like, come on. And I'm getting paid to hug people. But from inside that costume, I'm watching people that without question are having one of the best times that they will ever have in their entire life. And I'm part of it every day, and I'm getting paid to be part of it. And it wasn't work. Throwing the boxes at UPS was hard, but I liked that too, because when I got to UPS, I got to watch when they had these catwalks. And if your truck was empty, there was a guy that would be on the catwalk, and he could see there was no boxes coming down. And he would whistle, for you to get out and go down to Winston-Salem or to go over to San Diego. And they took 4 hours, and they just milked. You worked it. But I love that because I was watching this business operate so efficiently. Plus the physicality, I didn't mind that. I'm throwing boxes. But even the whole time I'm at UPS, I enjoyed it because I was learning, and I used those UPS days for the efficiencies so that I don't have people with downtime. I built a software system called Litify, and basically Litify was kind of like those catwalk, but I could do it for my firm. I just sold Litify to a company called Bessemer for $300-something million for 60%, but Litify was kind of inspired by UPS, where I could see everything and control everything. And I took it and when I was talking to my guy, Reuben Moskowitz, we talked a lot about UPS and squeezing every minute out of every hour, but also paying the shit out of people for working. I believe that most people in most law firms work at about 30 to 40% of the time. But just think if you could get 100% out of the time. UPS got 100% out of me. They got they paid me, but they got every minute, because if the box stopped coming down that truck, that guy on the catwalk was whistling. And when I was going to the truck, he was screaming, "Run." And I ran.
I've heard they work you pretty good.
But you got paid really incredible.
Wow. Let me switch gears, and we're gonna wrap up. I don't want to take much more of your time. I appreciate this, John. So I don't know about you. So for me, the greater success I obtain, the more concern I am it could be taken away from me. I don't know if this is from instability in childhood, chaos, this the shoe's going to drop. Have you ever, and I get that way, I try to say, no. You're not thinking that way. Do you ever, even at your level, at this stage of your life, do you ever feel like that?
Well, I dream about it all the time. I have dreams that I'm broke or I'm back in school and, the bottom is falling out. I'm not as, now probably, I would hate for all of it to end, but no matter what, I can't even spend my interest in a year now. On my money. So I don't worry like I did. I live okay, but I got, I worry. The firm could. The firm is so big. You worry about the size of it because it's just so massive, and the overhead is so huge. It's 50-60 million a month to run this place. But I worry about that. But if I had to wind it all down, John Morgan's life never changes.
That's awesome.
That's good. That's a good sign. That's
yeah.
a good thing. Not having to worry. I'd be, humiliated. And I do worry about, could this thing crash? During the pandemic, I really worried about it. I really worried about it. So, but I don't really worry about missing a meal.
Was the pandemic the scariest time since you've been in business?
Yes. Well, I had so many people. I had such a payroll, and they were closing. Everything was closing. There were no new accidents for 3 months either. But we did very well during the pandemic. In February, when I started seeing people remember, hope is not a plan. When I started seeing people in Italy, I was in Hawaii and I saw people in Italy die. And I had a guy out there with me, Peter Polos, who's a lawyer at Brian Panish's firm. And he was going to go to Italy. And I said, "You're not going to Italy." He's like, "Oh, we're going to Italy." I said, "Look what's happening." And the next day. And I said, "You're not going to Italy." Then one day he comes in and goes, "I'm not going to Italy." And so what I did early, I took 60 people and I moved them to home because I thought this is going to happen. So I started beta testing what it would be like to work from home. And then as I kept watching that pandemic spread across the world, I started moving more and more people home. So by the time I had to actually go to home, I was ready. I wasn't scrambling. I had a plan for the plan. And then the insurance companies kept paying money, and we started doing Zooms, and we had a hell of a year. But I thought it could take me under.
Wow, really?
Well, look, I got 5,000 employees. Wow. What if the insurance company? What if they don't settle case? I still had rent. I still had the overhead didn't stop.
You got through it.
I was scared in 2008 because insurance companies were crashing. I didn't know would they crash. I didn't know. So, and look, I come from the school of only the paranoid survive anyway. So I'm built, I'm looking over my shoulder all the time anyway.
I'm the same way. My wife says, "You can breathe now. Everything's all right." I said, honestly, I can't. I can't.
You can't breathe. You can't breathe until you have enough money that you have your house paid off and enough money that the interest from that money can live your lifestyle. I've always done it like this. Like tax-free bonds will probably yield you 4 or 5%, let's say now. So I'd say to you, what does it take for you to live? If you said, I need $250,000 a year to live, then I would say you're going to need about $6 million, because 6 million times 4 is 240 tax-free. So if your number was, if you said, I need $250,000 a year to live, and I've done this my whole life too. If it takes me $250,000 a year to live, if I have $6 million in a tax-free bonds at 4%, that yields me $240,000 a year tax-free, and I don't hit the corpus, and then my house is paid off. That's when you can breathe. But you still, then you start going, I think I need more than $250,000 a year. I think what I'd really be happy with is $500,000. And I say, well, then you're going to need $12 million of tax-free bonds. And you say, well, I think I need $1 million. As it turns out now, I think I need $1 million a year to live. And I say, well, in that case, you're going to need $25 million, whatever it is, as you move the goalpost to what you need to live. So tell your wife, so you got to figure out what your number is, house paid off, multiplied by 4 or 5% tax-free, then you can breathe.
Even then I wouldn't. I mean, it's just not my DNA.
No, you would as well. Certain people, most people have a satiable appetite. In other words, when they get to here, that's it. About 1% of the population has an insatiable appetite, no matter what it is. I mean, look, I used to tell my wife, if we get $10 million, we're done. We are. And then it became, then I heard this term, ultra high net worth individuals, 30. Like, what we got to have is 30. Yeah. Well, if you ever had 100 million, then you're really in rare. You just, it's like pole vaulting. You just keep raising the bar because you want to be, over 17, 18 feet if you can. I mean, it's just, that's how we keep score. That's how we win.
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate everything. I just want one last question. How has being a grandfather changed you?
The best thing about being a grandfather is, number one, well, first of all, you're happy to see them come and you're happy to see them go. It's the best because all you have to do is be good and great. When they come, when they sleep with me, I get Cokes and Starburst, and we sit in bed and do shit that I never would have let my kids do.
Yeah.
I keep at the beach and here, I keep snacks and treats that never. And when they walk in here, they're walking into paradise. I'll never yell at them. I'll talk, but and what's amazing is when I look back at my life, I have it in segments, and it's like, here was this time in my life, here was this time in my life. I think the best time in my life was when my children were born till the time they were like 13, those years. Because when you walk in those years, when you walk in, they look at you, and they don't just look at you, they run to you. And they don't just run to you, they run with a big grin on their face. And they don't just run, they jump into your arms, and they hug you and hug you and hug you. And you forget how good that felt. Well, it's all back. I'm getting to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's the single greatest feeling in the world to get to do that happiest time of my life. That I get to relive it again with my children, with their children, and to hear out of the corner of my ear, 1, 2, 3, bubblegum.
That's awesome. John, very inspiring. I'm sure anyone that listens to this is inspired by your success. Appreciate you once again taking time. It means a lot to me, so thank you. So that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Answering Legal YouTube channel. John, thank you so very much.
All right. Peace.